Goes. Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenience, truth telling, and myth busting. And on the program today, we welcome back to the program, returning champion John Potash. John is a counselor by day, but he is an incredible independent journalist and activist by night, and he is the author of several books. One of them, including a documentary companion piece, is "Drugs as Weapons Against Us: The CIA War on Musicians and Activists." He's also the author of the FBI War on Tupac Shakur. State repression of black leaders from the from the civil rights era to the 1990s. And John is also the author of a fairly controversial documentary called "Shots: Eugenics to Pandemics," which I also think people should check out, even if they may not agree with the premise. But it's a very very interesting documentary, and everybody can check out all of those books and films at his website, which I'll make sure to link at the end of this interview. So before we get into the topic of Tupac, John, thank you so much for coming back on the program, especially on such short notice.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Youri.
It's a real honor to have you on, and I just have to ask very briefly, because we don't have too much time. Are there a lot of huge activisms and student action that's going on right now in solidarity for Palestine that's happening that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm hearing about them and seeing them on the news in various college campuses around the country. Sure.
Okay, fantastic. And
there was there was a big protest on Friday in New York City for the Palestinians. Sure.
Yeah, and I just want to say to people that unfortunately we won't be covering that, but solidarity to those solidarity to the Palestinian solidarity activists and so forth. And if people want to watch all of my coverage on Israel and Palestine, I'll make sure to link to the playlist. All right, John, let's get into the reason I wanted to have you, which was to talk about Tupac Shakur. And I know that you have a new book out, so actually explain the premise of that book. And if I understood correctly, it's actually a republished book, but there's some new additional information about it. Talk to us about that.
Right. So I came out with the book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders, in 2007. And it was, just I was with a more, independent kind of small publishing name that now is republished with a larger independent publisher named Microcosm Publishing. And they put it out in 2021. And they cut out some chapters from the original book. But they added some other stuff that they thought, like an epilogue that brings us much more up to date on what happened to Afeni Shakur. What was going on with Russell Poole and this great detective, Greg Kading, which I'll talk about in a minute. And what was the current situation with Matulu Shakur and others, and Mumia Abu Jamal and others. So it's just a more up-to-date kind of epilogue. And so I'm happy enough with the new publication, and that it has a much wider reach in terms of getting it onto more bookshelves and Barnes and Nobles, bookstores around the country and all.
That's a perfect segue to this question, which is what is the latest news about the arrest of this suspect that the cops and media think might be the person to have murdered Tupac in a drive-by shooting? And I'm curious your thoughts.
Sure.
To that.
So the man they arrested was named Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, um, and he was part of a supposed plot that that was written about by a guy named Detective Greg Kading. Now, this Greg Kading came in many years after Detective Russell Poole was first assigned. He really got himself assigned to the Biggie Smalls murder investigation soon after, right after Biggie Smalls' murder in 1997. And that was about 6 months after Tupac's murder. And so Russell Poole had a father that was a police detective. He happened to be a white police detective. And so his higher ups thought that they would be in line with their racist kind of targeting that they were involved with regarding Tupac and Biggie. And so when Russell Poole came to them with the fact that he found dozens and dozens of his fellow police officers at all levels of death row records, and he asked, what are they doing there? They told him, you can call them troubleshooters or covert agents, were the exact words his bosses told him. So, the covert agents is a, interesting term, because that's exactly what they were, really. And when you say agents, of course, you're referring to U.S. intelligence. And so we already know that at least one New York police intelligence agent is a New York police officer. His name's in my book, and I talk about how the fact that he was also working for the FBI at the same time as working for the New York City Police Department. And that's the way it works. There's overlap between the very top, the CIA director is the director of all the other U.S. intelligence agency directors, 14 plus U.S. intelligence agency directors. We're talking about NSA, FBI, naval intelligence, etc. There's many different intelligence agencies under the CIA director. And so here is the FBI involved with police intelligence, local police intelligence. And this man was, who I named, was surveilling Biggie Smalls right before his murder, took pictures of him right before his murder. And Russell Poole, a filmmaker named Nick Broomfield, reveals how he said he found the guy that took the pictures of Biggie right before his murder. He got his phone number from someone. He's talking to him in his film, and his name's Detective Oldham. Okay, so another researcher, guy Nick Sullivan. Guy named Randall Sullivan wrote a book called Labyrinth, where he got all of Russell Poole's files, police files. Russell Poole allowed him to use his police files to write that book, and Russell Poole also made himself available to Nick Broomfield to make the film Biggie and Tupac. And so in the police files, you'll find it's a Detective Oldham who worked for the New York City Police Department, but also was listed as an FBI, agent. Okay, and so he was watching the Puffy murder trial at that time that Nick Broomfield talked to him on the phone, and he asked Nick Broomfield, "How'd you get my number?" And Nick Broomfield, like, kind of comically pretended like, what, I can't hear you so well, we're in traffic. How'd you get my number? And he kept not answering him because he wouldn't give his source, who leaked it. But so here they were surveilling Puffy, surveilling Biggie, and murdering Biggie, obviously. And all what Russell Poole said is, what he told Nick Broomfield was they murdered Biggie in order to cover up their murder of Tupac. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, so Russell Poole, lets this information out. I mean, he was demoted when he started coming out with this information. And then he had to leave the force, leave the force, and hold a press conference in order for this information to come out. And that's when, when people like Nick Broomfield and Randall Sullivan heard that press conference, that's when they started, investigating what information he had. So Russell Poole, ends up still investigating what's going on. And he tries to come out with more information after these big projects came out, Nick Broomfield and Randall Sullivan. And he wrote a book himself with Michael Carlin a writer named Michael Carlin, and who I was talking to after their book came out. And Russell Poole and Michael Carlin told me Russell Poole had more information, more evidence. He dug up evidence to find who the actual shooter might have been. He was delivering that evidence to a police sheriff in the Los Angeles area. There's the county, at least Los Angeles County has a sheriff. The city has a different huge, much larger police force. But so here he was delivering evidence to the county sheriff because the person, believe the person that he thought had evidence on might have been located in that area of Los Angeles. And in that meeting, Michael Carlin says that Reggie Wright Jr., the head of death row security, who was a former police officer, was at the meeting. And meanwhile, Russell Poole had information that suggested that Reggie Wright Jr. was majorly behind the murder/assassination of Tupac Shakur. And here he is in the meeting, and a police source told Michael Carlin this, and he was very scared. He was very worried about him being in that meeting. Nonetheless, he didn't have a heart attack from it, like some movies have pretended. What happened though is there was a number of police officers in that meeting, and Michael Carlin said, the police source said, they held Russell Poole down, got a defibrillator, and shocked his chest and caused his heart attack and basically murdered him in that meeting. Okay. And he had, he would have had burn marks on his chest from being shocked or whatever. But either way, they killed him in that meeting. And it's just horrible that happened. So meanwhile, but before Russell Poole was murdered, he wrote, they brought Greg Kading out of retirement. Okay, a detective named Greg Kading. And Greg Kading pretended to reinvestigate the whole situation with Tupac's murder and Biggie's murder. Came out with his book, and the movie was made about it real fast because it was all police work. He was trying to defend the Los Angeles Police Department, and in his book, he pretended like he talked to Russell Poole and he was debunking Russell Poole's investigation. Russell Poole said in a comment on his book on Amazon that Greg Kading never talked with me at all about my investigation, and said that this is all. And Greg Kading was a discredited police officer. He was caught lying in court, forced to retire early, and then they brought him out of retirement just to write this bogus book and do this bogus investigation. And so Greg Kading says that during, when the night Tupac was killed, was assassinated, he was coming out of a Mike Tyson fight. He's going through the MGM hotel lobby. Another member of Death Row says to him, "There's this guy who snatched a chain off my neck, and he's horrible." And meanwhile, Tupac had a chain torn off his neck before in the past, and what they did is they got Tupac drunk and stoned right before that fight, and he just was more easily manipulated by that, and he was manipulated to get into a scuffle with this Orlando Anderson, a brief scuffle. Exactly. Tons of people are there, police are there. They end the scuffle. Orlando Anderson, by all accounts, pretended like it wasn't a big deal. Wouldn't talk to the cops, wouldn't charge it, press charges or anything. He didn't take it anywhere. But then Tupac went on with this night, and he didn't even want to go to Las Vegas, to be honest, because another bodyguard of his who was also a police officer, Kevin Hackey, had warned him not to go to Vegas. Now, Kevin Hackey was also working for the FBI at the time. He was being paid by the FBI also. And he turned on the FBI, argue, and warned Tupac not to go to Vegas that night. But Tupac was supposed to do a benefit concert after the Mike Tyson at Club 662. And that benefit concert would have satisfied a court hearing where a guy in his car was caught with marijuana on him, and was charged to Tupac because Tupac was driving. But so he decided to do that benefit concert, go to the Tyson fight, do the benefit concert and all that. So he's driving in a car with Suge Knight, of course, and that's when he's he's murdered, he's assassinated. Now, so Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, so basically Greg Kading says that in his book that he got Dwayne Keefe D. Davis to confess, quote unquote, confess that he orchestrated the murder of Tupac with his nephew, Orlando Anderson, the guy that took the beating in that little scuffle in the MGM lobby, shooting Tupac, being the actual shooter. Now, someone killed Orlando Anderson 2 years after that incident of Tupac, being killed. And so Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is called on another video saying that, well, my nephew was actually hurt so bad in that scuffle in the MGM lobby that he had to go to the emergency room. And then within 2 hours, though, he supposedly came out of the emergency room, got in the car with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, according to Greg Kading's story, and murdered Tupac. And, according to Greg Kading's story and Dwayne Keefe D. Davis's story, he also got $1 million from Puffy, from P. Diddy, to carry out that murder. And that murder was supposed to be of both Tupac and Suge Knight, okay, as part of the East Coast, West Coast rap war, okay? And so it's this fantastical story, which is all bogus, really, because Kading was on a documentary a documentary series called "Who Killed Tupac" on A&E. It was shown on A&E, which I was featured in too, right?
Series.
Yeah, thanks. And so, the civil rights lawyer Benjamin Crump and a journalist had Greg Kading admit that Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was up for life in prison for a drug dealing charge. And if he just confessed, that he would get totally off of that charge, that drug dealing charge, which he faced prison, life imprisonment for. And they said that someone who, gets traded, not facing life in prison for a confession will say anything you want. Okay. And so the whole story could be totally made up, and they usually coach them what to say, and they have them say and pretend like it's a confession. And so that's one aspect of Kading's story, which is totally ridiculous, which is just, it can so easily eroded. And then the other aspect of his story, he's just caught lying in Nick Broomfield's next film, a sequel to, Biggie and Tupac, where, he's caught saying that Rafael Ray Perez, and a guy named Mac, these are two LA police officers that were caught as the top figures in the Rampart scandal. Mac was caught robbing a bank, okay, while he was a police officer. And Ray Perez was the supposed, whistleblower on all of the Rampart scandal, and all the police officers involved in the Rampart scandal. It was supposed to be the biggest.
Yeah, which was a huge police corruption scandal, right, during the 90s, I believe. Yeah.
Right. And now Russell Poole says that the whole Rampart scandal was based on these guys that were part of Death Row Records, and the whole scandal, investigation was a big cover up of the huge operation they had going in Death Row Records, where they were trafficking drugs, they were trafficking guns, and they were also trying to end the Bloods versus Crips gang peace truce that Tupac and his Black Panther extended family had made happen, to turn these gangs onto activism and stop police brutality and all. And that was one of Tupac's top projects that he was working on. That was what Thug Life was. The Code of Thug Life was to reduce the harm that gangs did to their communities, and to get them to call peace truces and start turning on to activism. And so he was helping that spread throughout Los Angeles, and then throughout California, and then throughout the country, and it was very successful. It happened in New York City with the Latin Kings. They got inspired to turn on to activism by the Code of Thug Life and the Thug Life movement. And many Black activists were involved. Even Black musicians like Harry Belafonte got involved, and all kinds of people got involved in that, particularly Tupac's extended Black Panther family. But Tupac was the most instrumental person involved, because he was the most beloved by the young community of gangbangers. And so that was one of the reasons Tupac was such a threat, was because he was getting these gang members to stop being involved in as much crime and turn on to activism and turn on to legitimate, businesses, and stop dealing drugs. And in New York City, it was so successful. The Latin Kings, when they were arrested en masse, they found no drugs, no guns, nothing on them. When they used to be, huge drug dealers in New York City. And so, and some Columbia, New York City professors wrote a book about that gang transformation of Latin Kings, that was published by Columbia University Press. So anyway, this was, why Tupac was a threat. And Reggie Wright Jr. was so instrumental because not only was he head of Death Row Records security, which was dozens of police officers moonlighting in Death Row Records, but his father was head of the Compton, Los Angeles gang division. So his father, Reggie Wright Sr., was instrumental in trying to end the gang peace truce in Compton, which was one of the first places that the gang peace truce started in Los Angeles. And so, and that's where Black Panthers, former Black Panthers, had first gotten peace truces going. And so this is what was going on. And so here's this Greg Kading making up this story, getting Dwayne Keefe D. Davis to be part of it. Orlando Anderson, meanwhile, was paid a lot of money to take that beating in the MGM Grand, just to try to cover up what really happened to Tupac, make it look like it was gang related, because his uncle was a gang member. But Nick Broomfield said the best evidence was that Orlando Anderson actually wasn't a gang member, even though his uncle was. But Orlando Anderson did get a lot of money right after that scuffle and that beating. And nonetheless, he was, the cover up started when he was murdered 2 years later. But there was a lot of other cover up, of course. So the top witness, Tupac's close friend and backup singer, Yafu Fula, also known as Gaddafi in his group, the Outlaws.
Yeah.
He was a top witness to Tupac's murder, and he was murdered the night of the next Mike Tyson fight, and he was shot in the head, and it was an execution style murder. And they have all kinds of stories trying to cover that up. But his father, Yafu Fula's mother, was a major part of Tupac's business. Yasmin Fula was a former Black Panther. Yafu Fula's father was Sekou Odinga, who had founded the Bronx Black Panthers and was a major, very close to Afeni Shakur. They were both very close to Afeni Shakur, and a major part, major figure in the movement. So that was another assassination of a major, Black musician and activist. So and this is what this is all about. This is just one big cover up. 27 years later, they're pretending to solve the case, and it's just a joke. And I think one of the reasons they're doing this
And
at
then,
this time,
and then also to add like more insult
sure,
to the injury, wasn't it one of the cops that you mentioned, the one who was the one who supposedly was trying to get to the answers, and they made these propaganda films about the FBI trying to find the who killed Biggie and Tupac. Wasn't that the same investigator, fake investigator, who was leaking to the press that the FBI thinks Biggie was the one that killed Tupac in response to that disgusting song "Hit 'Em Up," but
right?
but from your from your investigation,
Mhm.
your your Jack Hughes, so to speak,
Yeah.
is that Tupac, from the day he started to do music, socially conscious protest music, was
Mhm.
harassed by the police, and then they
Mhm.
tried to get him on a sex scandal, and when that sort of worked, but he later got out of prison. Then he was later manipulated through pots or booze and the dodgy people that were surrounding him, such nights crew, and they
Yeah.
manipulated him into thinking Biggie and his crew was behind the attempt on his life in New York. That leads to the "Hit 'Em Up" song. But in the end of the day, the person who the person or the persons that has killed Tupac. This was CIA / FBI, assassination. And
Sure.
Suge Knight,
Yeah,
the
Suge Knight. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
yeah,
so yeah,
the
basically there was 4 to 6 assassination attempts of Tupac before he was murdered. I document the various assassination attempts of Tupac before he was actually murdered, starting with when he first came out with his solo, debut on a major label, Tupacalypse Now, and his political song "Trapped," made its MTV worldwide, debut release. A few days after it was released, Oakland police pretended to stop Tupac for jaywalking, and then proceeded to choke him unconscious and smash his head against the curb. And I show how 2 other people in police custody were killed through these methods, through these police behaviors. And a second time at Marin City, strangers, punched Tupac for no reason and shot at him when he was an honorary guest at this huge music fest in Marin City. At Marin City Music Festival, and they shot him for no reason, and police watched and didn't intervene at all. They just arrested Tupac after it and didn't arrest the people that attacked Tupac. And then there was a situation, as you talked about, with the sexual abuse charge, where they tried to set him up with that to imprison him for the rest of his life. And that was completely concocted. He only got found guilty of touching a woman's butt against her will, who he had consensual sex with, and the jury found that they had consensual sex, because he was found not guilty of sodomy, attempted sodomy, forced sodomy, anything like that.
but was found guilty of being complicit in allowing his entourage who allegedly
Yeah.
sexually assaulted this woman.
No, just only that he touched her butt against her will, and that Haitian Jacques Agnant touched this woman's butt against her will. But no one was found guilty of sodomy, forced sodomy, any other kind of sexual abuse. She was not raped, according to the jury. She was not raped by, anyone else. There's nothing like that, in the jury's opinion. And so for that, though, for touching a woman's butt against her will, who he had consensual sex with, she was given 1.5 to 4.5 years in maximum security prison sentence. It's incredible. It's an incredible sentence. And so that was, and Haitian Jacques Agnant, who had set it all up, according to his Tupac's New York trial lawyer, Michael Warren, he had a rap sheet a mile long of major charges up and down the East Coast, which he says a sure sign of a government intelligence agent. Okay. And so Haitian Jack was an intelligence agent who set it all up. And this is, so his real name is Haitian Jacques, his real name is Jacques Agnant. Anyway, so he goes by a lot of aliases, though. And so, different magazine articles might have different alias names, like Trevor and other things. Anyway, so after that original, police arrest in New York City for that, Tupac is in Atlanta, and it was around the same time as that, he ends up at a concert where police start beating up a black man in front of his car. This is white police officers beating up a black man. They're undercover, though. They're in street clothes. Tupac says, rolls down his window and says, "What's going on?" They run over his car, smash his window, according to white and black witnesses at the incident in Atlanta. Tupac merely, so they smash his window with the butt of their gun and shoot at him. Tupac merely rolls out of the back of the car, grabs the security guard's gun, and shoots back in self-defense. And so here's a young black man shooting 2, white police officers, and getting away with it without even going through the court any more than a month or so, where they ended up dismissing it. And that's, a sign that they didn't want to get caught in yet another police assassination attempt. Okay, because these white police officers were using a gun that they had stolen from an evidence locker, which police call a throwaway gun. That if they murder someone without good evidence that there was a reason to murder that someone, they can just put it down and it can't be traced back to them. Okay. And so this is another murder attempt. And then while he was in the trial for that sexual assault charge, they were just about to go. The jury was just about to come out with their verdict, and the night before they're coming out with their verdict, strangers, supposedly mugged him.
There was another attempt on his life.
Yeah,
That's
there's
what happened
another attempt on his
in
life.
New
Yeah,
York.
a year after the Atlanta murder attempt. Tupac's recording, is called to the recording studio in Times Square. It was on November 30th of, I believe it was 1994, and called the Quad Recording Studio. And it was offered thousands of dollars just to lay down a few lines on a rap song. And so a surveillance camera has it on film, him coming into that recording studio, being buzzed into that recording studio, people coming in behind him and shooting him to get him down on the ground, and then shooting him twice in the skull. Bullets went through the back of his skull and out the front of his skull and barely missed his brain, according to a doctor's affidavit. And that's the way that U.S. intelligence murders people, is they shoot them once to get them down on the ground and shoot them twice in the head to murder them, according to articles about their intelligence attempts.
And of course, with that came the paranoia that Tupac concocted in his head, but that's because of but that's because of the crew he was with. I don't think such night comes in
because of the other murder attempts. Yeah, he was paranoid at that point because there was several other murder attempts, as I described. Biggie was upstairs, recording upstairs, and so was Puffy. They were both upstairs recording, and Biggie, visited Tupac in the hospital right after that. But because they were friends. Tupac had given Biggie his big break and helped him get some stardom. He brought him up on stage during his concerts and helped him become famous. Helped Biggie become famous, and because they were friends. And but people all around Tupac would tell him. I mean, people that were, I believe, were paid to say this, told him, "Oh, don't you know? Everyone knows Biggie, got you shot." And they sent him fake letters when he was in prison, etc. And meanwhile, so he survived that assassination attempt, another assassination attempt.
There was also a song that Biggie had recorded called "Who Shot Ya," and that was leaked to Tupac by probably some undercover FBI or CIA agent, and that's where Tupac later, when he falls prey into such night, thinks, okay, Biggie and Bad Boy were behind it, and then that's when he records that disgusting song, "Hit 'Em Up," and then basically attacks all of these East Coast rappers, and then the media then says that there's a whole East Coast, West Coast thing, which is why you do have some people to this day think that Tupac was killed by Biggie, and that Biggie was killed in retaliation for Tupac's murder. But again, your brilliant, journalism says that, dude, this is all like FBI, CIA manipulating, manipulating all of this. But
so I compare these tactics that they used with this situation to the same tactics they used against the Black Panthers. Tupac's Black Panther mother, Afeni Shakur, was a one-time leader of the Harlem Black Panthers. And the FBI documents that were stolen from an FBI office show that their counterintelligence program, their official counterintelligence program, which wasn't known of until the documents were stolen in 1971, say that they were pitting leaders and different, figures against each other through fake letters, through undercover agents, whispering in their ear. Oh, everyone knows, that the New York Panthers are trying to take the leadership of the Black Panthers and from you, Huey Newton, the founder of the Black Panthers in Oakland. And so it created this.
Also got Huey into drugs to cloud his judgment.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they had many tactics that they used against both Tupac and his mother, Afeni, with drugs, trying to drug them to get them more cloudy in their thinking, sending fake letters back and forth between the New York Black Panthers in prison and Huey Newton's Black Panther leadership in Oakland, California, creating that New York California rift, similar to the Black Panther, similar to Biggie and Tupac, because so they set that all up and use that to manipulate Tupac. And remember, Tupac was only about 23 at this time, 23 years old, and Biggie was 22 years old. So that they were just more impressionable and more easily manipulated at this time. So it was they then messed up Tupac's head while he was in prison with something called penal coercion tactics that they use against activists. And Amnesty International said it was the closest thing to brainwashing. Now we think
coercion.
Penal coercion, yeah. They Amnesty International, printed a whole list of this technique that U.S. intelligence uses called penal coercion. It's different techniques they use when activist prisoners in jail to imprison to mess their heads up and manipulate them. And so I discussed that in my book and discussed in my film and all, and but nonetheless, this is what they did, and they messed his head up and made him more easily manipulated that way. He was so desperate in prison that's why he signed a 3-record deal with Death Row Records when they kept visiting him in prison and they wouldn't let him out of prison. But as soon as he signed
actually, if I can interrupt, then I have to ask this question, which is and that's going to lead us to and that's actually going to lead us to Sudge, which I really do want to explore that and how the drugs messed up Tupac's mind, and all that. I'm wondering if you saw the documentary about Afeni Shakur and Tupac, the influence she had on him and vice versa, as well as the fact that although the documentary doesn't do the j'accuse your body of work does, but the documentary clearly said that Afeni and the Black Panthers were definitely targeted by the state terrorism, CIA, FBI, and they basically compared the constant police harassment Tupac faced already in the beginning of his career, and also manipulating some of Tupac's flaws, like his over aggressiveness sometimes, the fact that he was a very a guy that was always seeming to get into fights and so forth. They basically compared what the state did to Afeni and the Black Panthers to what they did with Tupac and the whole East Coast, West Coast thing. So I'm curious if you saw the documentary, if you saw that. I think it's about 3 or 4 parts, and just curious, like very briefly, your response before we talk about Sudge.
You talking about Dear Mama?
Yes, Dear Mama, the saga of Afeni and Tupac Shakur.
Yeah. So Dear Mama, yeah, I did see Dear Mama, and when I gave my book to Jamal Joseph, who was one of the co-producers of Dear Mama, is great, great Black Panther. He's Tupac's uncle. Tupac calls him Uncle Jamal, and I have him both in my last film, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, and in a coming film I'm coming out with, which is a sequel to Drugs as Weapons Against Us. Basically, Jamal, identifies that Tupac was killed by a latter-day FBI COINTEL program, counterintelligence program. In my next film, he implied it in my last film, and I'm going to say he says it more, explicitly in my next film. But so I think the thing is, one of the Hughes brothers was in charge of Dear Mama, and Jamal was the top consultant and co-producer. But I think really Jamal didn't have quite the power over it, like the Hughes brother director did. He had the most power over it, and so I thought that was a very good film, except that its ending was very problematic because Tupac, basically his thug life was about pretending to be this gangster in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them. Tupac was really a brilliant intellectual, okay, who was only pretending again to as part of this movement to get closer to these gang leaders, to influence them to turn on to activism.
And thug life also thug life also has nothing to do with like embracing gangster lifestyle. It has nothing to do with glorifying the gang life. It's all about the kind of radical social racial justice
Right.
activism, as you described earlier in this interview,
Yeah.
bringing peace between the gangs and not falling into the divide and conquer of the white
Yeah.
supremacist state. Correct?
Right. I started researching the Black Panthers in 1991, and then when Tupac was shot in that New York recording studio lobby and Quad recording studio lobby in New York City, I started, researching Tupac, and came out with my first article in the spring of 1995 saying, "Is the FBI targeting, murderously targeting Tupac like they targeted his Black Panther parents?" So before he died, I came out with this article in a local, magazine, but there was a whistleblowing magazine, a CIA whistleblowing magazine called Covert Action Quarterly, which I tried to get it to, at that time. But there was I believe there was an undercover agent who kept, when I went into the office, he would steer me out of the office and say, let's talk, keep it between us. And I saw Lou Wolf, one of the founders of Covert Action Quarterly, and I tried to give it to him, and this guy literally grabbed me and steered me away and pushed me away from him. And meanwhile, now I'm close friends with Lou Wolf. So after Tupac died, I published my first major, bigger article, national article. It was really an internationally known magazine, Covert Action Quarterly. In that magazine, with about 50 endnotes and all, and it was called
That's
so.
that is so fascinating. But then I have to ask this question, which
Yeah.
is Suge Knight. Now,
Yeah, they can
this
pronounce his name Suge Knight. Suge Knight. That's okay.
Suge Knight,
Suge,
Suge Knight.
Suge like sugar, like Suge
Yeah,
Knight.
oh yes, of course. but but John, I have to ask you this question because this is something which always bothers me about the Tupac story and his very tragic demise, and the foolish people who think that Biggie was involved in Tupac's death, which I always thought was BS. Now, somebody like Knight. Now, this is a guy that you can tell from a mile away is is a very dodgy person. He's mobbed up, he's surrounded by factions of gangs. Why would somebody as bright and brilliant as Tupac get involved with a guy like that, with a guy like that, in which already, when people would be recording music at Death Row Records, there was always incidents of violence, racketeering, uh, and stuff like that, which was why Dre, left, Death Row at the height of its popularity, wanting nothing to do with Suge and what was
Right,
going on.
right. So Tupac, when he was in prison, maximum security prison, they were torturing him. Okay, they were
How so? Torturing him? How so?
well, the penal coercion was a mental torture, but they were also, every time someone visited Tupac in prison, they would pretend like they had to do rectal exams to look for contraband that might have been stuck up his rectum. And they would have put their plastic, their rubber gloves on, and it's just, they
So
do.
he was subjected to cavity searches a lot then.
Right. And that's just one of the ways they were torturing him. They were torturing him in various ways like that. And meanwhile, he had a major wound in his femoral artery right near the rectum that was very painful when he was shot there, in that New York recording studio lobby. And so God knows what they were doing to him in prison besides, the penal coercion and the rectal exams. But anyway, and so he was desperate to get out of prison. And he thought that was just signing that record deal was the only way he could get out of prison. And what Tiny Tiny Himba, his first business, manager, who was a former Los Angeles Black Panther, told me that Tupac cried on his shoulder, saying, "I know I'm selling my soul to the devil by joining Death Row Records. I just have to get out of prison." Because Watani's group, the New African People's Organization, which is like the adult aspect of the New African Panthers, because remember, Tupac was head of a group called the New African Panthers when he was a teenager, and that was a group trying to replicate the Black Panthers, and that's why, you know, he was on U.S. intelligence's radar from day one as a teenager. He was already a national Black activist leader before he became a rapper, you know, like a serious rapper. And so so Watani Tayimba said, well, we're going to have to disconnect from you, Tupac, if you sign with Death Row Records, because we don't know what's going on in Death Row Records, but we know they're too dangerous for us to be involved with, you know. So what I argue is that,
so they warned him. I mean, even on records,
yeah,
his theater teacher, who was his first manager, very nice, compassionate white woman, also all say on record that they warned Tupac, do not get involved with dodgy people like Sudge. But Pac, I guess,
yeah, but he was just desperate to get out of prison, and so he signed a 3-record deal just to get out of prison. And basically, Suge Knight and Death Row Records put up, you know, it was really Dave Kenner was the real owner of Death Row Records, and he was a just, you know, very shady mafia lawyer, also connected to government figures, who you know, was basically the real owner of Death Row, the owner of the umbrella group that owned Death Row Records. And there's a lot more to this, but you know, you'll read it in my book or see it on my film. Can't go into it all right now, but anyway, so Suge Knight, I argue, was low man on the totem pole of U.S. intelligence's setup people of Tupac for this assassination. But Death Row Records, you know, with his dozens of police officers, you know, working moonlighting for them, were involved, according to Russell Poole, in drug trafficking, gun running, trying to end the Bloods versus Crips peace truce that Tupac was, you know, pushing for, and sure, they helped set up Tupac's assassination.
One of my second to last questions is, how much did Knight and his crew, you know, use alcohol, pot, and of course, and CIA and deep state manipulations to influence Pac's behavior, and did a lot of that cause Tupac to? I believe you said in several interviews that when Pac was on death row, that was when he started to have some of the most negative element, his most negative like lyrics. That's when he did that disgusting song, "Hit 'Em Up," which is a song I still can't listen to without it. Like it's just sickens like my stomach, like how like vile and violent like that song is. So how much did, like, you know, the use of like alcohol, marijuana, and other drugs that you know that these people did use on Tupac to
So
do
when
stuff
Tupac,
like hit him
yeah,
up and whatnot?
yeah, when Tupac was in prison, he recognized that he was just numbing himself, and he was getting drunk and stoned too much, particularly getting stoned too much, and was just, and that it caused him not to recognize what was happening when there was that assassination attempt in the New York recording studio lobby. He said he should have recognized that this person not acknowledging him outside the studio was highly strange and problematic, and he shouldn't have gone into the studio. He knew the guy that offered them the thousands of dollars was friends with Haitian Jacques Agnan. So he was, you know, but he didn't know how deep it went. So he you know, needed the money at the time because he was spending all his money on all these different frivolous lawsuits, on these you know, harassment arrests and all, and giving so much of his money to his Black Panther extended family to support various family members and support all other, you know, other causes. And so, you know, he needed the money, and so, but he should have recognized and not gone to that recording studio lobby, he said, but he was too stoned to recognize what was going on. And so he vowed to stop smoking weed when he was in jail, even though you can get any kind of drugs in jail, actually, you know, you can get weed and other drugs. And so, but he stopped using all that stuff. And but as soon as he got out of prison, Suge Knight immediately offered him, you know, loads of alcohol and weed, and got him really messed up, and got him in the recording studio immediately, literally within 20, right when he got out of prison, took him over to the recording studio lobby, where he produced much of his that album, his double CD for
All Eyes on
Death
Me.
Row Records, All Eyes on Me, yeah, and including Hit 'Em Up and other songs that that were the most negative songs he's ever made. And so I mean, Hit 'Em Up, came out as a single that wasn't on All Eyes on Me, but it was so that's literally what happened. Is he was so drunk and stoned and he was being manipulated, and Suge Knight and Dave Kenner constantly used penal coercion tactics on Tupac, along with the other police undercover agents in Death Row Records. They use these kinds of fear tactics. They would beat someone in Tupac's presence, as if this is a threat, that this could happen to you if you are thinking about leaving Death Row Records. They would do all kinds of horrible things for threats and manipulation of Tupac. So this is how it works. Sure.
I think it's really just it's really disturbing when you hear all of this. I think the only good thing that came out of it was Biggie, Puffy, and them not taking the bait and actually recording a song in response to Tupac. Mobb Deep did do a song in response to Tupac, but never ever like mentioned him by name or anything like that. But that's I don't know. It's just very it's just very disturbing, and I think very tragic, because I really do think that kind of like when Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali got into business with Don King. I think if Pac had never ever gotten into business with Sudge, maybe he might have still been alive.
Right.
Your
Well, Tupac at
response?
the people close to Tupac told me that towards the end of Tupac's life, he said, he just was upset with Biggie for not working harder to help him find the people who shot him in New York, versus thinking that he actually shot him or got him shot, because Tupac had helped someone else, find someone who had been involved in something against, I think, I don't know if it was against Biggie himself or someone, close to Biggie, but but he suggested that they record songs together, him and Biggie, under with this under an album called One Nation, where they East Coast and West Coast got together and did benefit songs or benefit albums for poor communities. And he wanted to start community centers around the country, start athletic leagues for poor kids around the country. And so he, at the end of his life, he didn't believe as much that East Coast West Coast stuff. He was leaving Death Row Records. He was starting his own music label, Euthanasia Records. When he was killed, he had the Euthanasia necklace on. Or I know at the MTV Awards right before he was killed, he was wearing the Euthanasia medallion on his neck. And he started his own film company, Tupac, and all that. So, he was really heading in a different direction and was doing, not much less manipulated, and was planning to get into activism. And he argued that he finished his 3 CDs with his double album, and then his third album, which was about to come out, Machiavelli, the 7-Day Theory. And
Still a lot of negative music on that one. Still him at his most negative.
No, not totally. He had Malcolm X on one of his songs on Machiavelli's 7-Day Theory. He exposed Haitian Jack as working for the feds, meaning the Federal Bureau of Investigation. As
Okay, I'll have to.
on that
All right,
album. Yeah, so
I'll have to check that out then.
yeah, he said, set me up. This is, he said, I got a Lace's rap about a snitch named Haitian Jack, snitch being intelligence agent working for the feds, set me up, wet me up. And so, set him up with the sexual abuse charge and wet me up with the shooting in the New York recording studio lobby. So he came out with a lot of information on that song. So it's an interesting album, and having Malcolm X talking on one of those, on that album, and the album was dedicated to his to Mumia Abu-Jamal and to Geronimo Pratt and different other political prisoners, Black Panther political prisoners. And so there's White Man's World is a very political song on that album. and so
Okay,
yeah, he
awesome.
came back to his roots. Yeah,
I'll have to check that out. I think probably
sure.
the reason why I'm not familiar with that is because the songs that are promoted of that one are the ones where he's attacking such and such an East Coast rapper or Dre and so forth. So again, the powers
Mixed, yeah,
to be are even manipulating
right,
Tupac's image.
sure.
We're almost out of time, and so I got three last questions for you. One has to be, what do you think is because it's been the 50th anniversary of hip hop as a genre, and rap, and more rappers are starting to become inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, including Tupac a couple years ago. So I have to ask this question, which is, what do you think? As somebody who's covered him and has finally answered who killed him as well as Biggie, what do you think is Tupac's greatest legacy as an artist and activist? And then the follow-up question to that is, what do you think was his worst and biggest negative legacy? You know,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Well, I think his most positive legacy is that he's inspired young people and older people around the world to just keep struggling to make the world better. I have a friend one line from the Serbian Croatian area of the world who was bombed by U.S. bombs in Yugoslavia,
Wow.
and he said that you know the thing that kept him going, he felt suicidal at times, just with so desperate with the being bombed and all his area being bombed and war torn, that Tupac's music kept him going, and he loved Tupac. And when he read my book, he just was so excited to see that side of Tupac, that activist side of Tupac, and that just made him such an activist. So Tupac, this is a white guy over there, and so
Yeah,
black
yeah,
and
from
white,
Eastern Europe, former Yugoslavia, Serbia, yeah.
yeah, yeah, white and black activists around the world have been inspired by Tupac and his struggles and his activism. They wear Tupac shirts in when African countries where they're struggling for independence and struggling to have a better country, a better government. They're in Germany, they have a big statue erected to Tupac, and my book was actually translated into German and republished. Just came out within the last year in Germany, in German, and there's just a love for Tupac there. So it's crazy how many different places around the world really just love Tupac and are inspired by his activism, his activist lyrics.
But what? But what do you think is his bad
The
legacy?
negative
Bad
the
legacy.
the negative aspect is the way they manipulated his image, to pretend like his thug life movement was about smoking weed and drinking and gang banging, not that he was trying to turn gangbangers into activists, but the opposite, that that he was promoting that stuff. And so the media, which is so intertwined with U.S. intelligence, sadly pushed that image from Tupac instead of the positive side of him, which was much more important and the key part of him.
Well, here's hoping with this republished book and this documentary, this companion documentary piece, that it'll give people, uh, encourage people to actually speak out and demand real justice for Tupac, as well as Biggie, including all of the other people, because of course your book and documentary has also shown that John Lennon did not die from just some random
Right.
insane person, and that Bob Marley did not just get cancer and so forth. So I really hope so people should take inspiration on that.
So
Before I
yeah,
let you go,
the book. Yeah, go on.
yeah, but before I let you go, John, the last time we had you on, we got censored. And I'm gonna make sure that people check out the link to that interview we did about your documentary shots. But since I have you on, we end the program doing the questionnaire done by Bernard Pivot, later and later James Lipton of Inside the Actor Studio. John, it's your turn to do this before I let you go. So yeah, let's get to it. John, what's your favorite word?
I'm sorry, activism, I guess.
What's your least favorite words?
Hatred, I guess.
Hatred.
Yeah.
Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally, or psychologically?
I guess music.
Fantastic. Then what turns you off then?
War.
What's your favorite curse word?
I'm sorry, I've got to go. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have time for any more of this questionnaire because I got a client. I've got to see a counselor. I do counseling for a living and
All
do the
right,
writing
no
on the
problem.
side. I'm sorry, Youri.
No problem. You can send you can send me the rest of the answers on email.
Right.
I'll make sure to publish this. Well, we are joined on this edition of 1+1 with John Potash, the author of several books: The FBI War on Tupac, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA War on Musicians and Activists, and also the documentary filmmaker of Shots, from
Yeah.
Eugenics to
So, yeah.
Pandemics.
So yeah, the book and film "Drugs as Weapons Against Us," the CIA War, Musicians and Activists. That probably has the most on Tupac that's available, internationally at this time.
No
You know,
problem.
you know
Well,
the yeah, the book. I mean, the book, of course, the FBI War on Tupac Shakur has much more in the film. But if you want to see it on film, that's the place for it right now. Yeah.
and folks can also watch those movies on the website. And folks, it'll be money well spent. So try not to watch it illegally. Until then, John, thank you so much for taking the time out. I'll get in touch with you via email to do the rest of the questionnaire. But until then, good luck with everything. And I hope all goes well with the book, and may it inspire more people to demand justice for Tupac and all of the other activists and musicians back then and now. Okay?
Thanks, Youri. All right, take care now. Bye
You
bye.
as well. Ciao till then.